Hello, and welcome to the Channel of Stories. Dear listeners, before we start the story, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like and share in the comments where you are from. Thank you. Here we go.
Brooklyn was buzzing the summer I turned 32. The city never really sleeps, but that year, it felt like even the nights were humming louder. I had what looked like a good life, a cozy apartment near Prospect Park, a decent marketing job, a shelf full of books I hadn't read but meant to. And Adam. Adam was my quiet place. Tall, bookish, with eyes like overcast skies and a voice that never rose. He was the kind of guy who brought you tea without asking how your day was, because somehow, he just knew. We met 5 years earlier at a poetry reading neither of us wanted to be at. I rolled my eyes at the third person quoting Bukowski, and he noticed. Afterward, he offered me half his stale cookie. We fell in love the way some people fall asleep, slowly, then all at once. But 5 years in, we weren't sleeping soundly anymore. It wasn't dramatic. There was no betrayal. Just a creeping silence. I'd ask him if he wanted to go out. He'd shrug. He'd ask me what I was thinking, and I'd say, in nothing. But that in nothing it was doing a lot of damage. We started speaking in logistics. Bills, vet appointments, who's grabbing groceries. Their I love you came out of habit. I started feeling lonelier with him than when I was by myself. And yet, there wasn't a single moment I could point to and say, there. That's where it broke. It was like watching paint crack. You don't notice until enough has peeled away, and you realize the wall underneath isn't what you remembered. I remember one night lying in bed beside him, wide awake, trying to match the rhythm of his breathing like I used to. It had once been a comfort, now it felt like a stranger's. I reached out to touch his shoulder, then pulled back before I made contact. I wasn't sure what I was afraid of, waking him up, or waking myself up to the truth. Even Callor, our dog, started acting differently. She lingered more by the window. She slept closer to the door. It's funny how animals sense things long before we admit them to ourselves. The silence between us became heavier than any argument could have. It settled into the corners of our home like dust. One night, I came home to find him sitting in the dark, petting our dog, Callor. The only light came from the TV screensaver bouncing silently around. He looked up and said, "I don't think I'm the person you fell in love with anymore." I stood there, backpack still on, and felt a wave of sorrow hit me. "Maybe I'm not either," I said. We didn't scream. We didn't even cry. We just agreed I'd stay at Marce's place for a while. I packed a bag, kissed Callor on the head, and left. It was the first time I'd slept somewhere else without Adam since the 2nd year of our relationship. The next morning, I woke up to a text from him. I fed Callor. "She misses you." I replied, "Tell her I'm sorry. And thank you." We weren't breaking up. At least, not officially. We were taking space. But that phrase felt like someone loosening the lid on something you never meant to open. At Marce's, I curled up under 2 thin blankets and stared at the popcorn ceiling, wondering what the hell had just happened. Was it over? Or just stalled? Marcy tried to make it feel like a sleepover, bringing out wine and gossiping about her coworkers. But I could barely pretend. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was Adam saying something real. It never was. He sent photos of Callor. A reminder to cancel the gym. A joke I didn't find funny. Safe, neutral, emotionless texts, proof that we were still in touch, but also proof that we weren't really saying anything. I wandered into a tiny park one afternoon and watched a kid feed pigeons with delight. His mom laughed from a bench nearby. That scene, the simplicity of it, gutted me. I'd forgotten how to find joy in small things. I'd wrapped my entire sense of peace around Adam, and now, unwrapped, I didn't know who I was. I missed him. But more than that, I missed me. Marcy lived in a workup that smelled like incense and ambition. She was newly single, thrived on chaos, and believed every breakup was a spiritual awakening in disguise. "You're not breaking down," she told me as I stirred instant oatmeal. "You're breaking open." I didn't feel open. I felt like a deflated balloon. In the days that followed, I walked aimlessly through the city. I watched strangers kiss at crosswalks. I listened to old voicemails from Adam. I wrote in a journal like it was the only way to speak. Eventually, I wrote something that made me pause. I wanted Adam to fix the parts of me I didn't understand. And just like that, I saw it. I'd made him my therapist, my anchor, my everything. But love isn't meant to carry the full weight of your healing. One evening, I wandered into a small jazz bar alone. I sipped a lukewarm Negroni and watched the saxophonist lose himself in music. It was messy, imperfect, human, and beautiful. I realized I hadn't let myself be that in years. That night, I dreamt of Adam, not the man he was, but the man I imagined he could be. And I woke up with a mix of grief and guilt so heavy I couldn't move for a full 10 minutes. The world around me kept moving. My co-workers didn't ask questions. My family sent passive-aggressive texts assuming the worst. And still, I remained still, stuck in a moment I wasn't ready to move through. But journaling gave me a strange form of clarity. I wrote every day, sometimes nonsense, sometimes confessions I'd never say aloud. I wrote about how I used to feel safest falling asleep to Adam's heartbeat. I wrote about how silence now felt like punishment instead of peace. The space between us wasn't just physical anymore. It was existential. Around that time, I ran into Emily and Josh, the picture-perfect couple from our friend group. Except now, they weren't a couple. "Divorced," Emily said over brunch, like it was just another item on the menu. Josh, she explained, had stopped trying. She had too, in quieter ways. Their love had expired, she said, and neither of them knew when. Her honesty was like cold water. It shocked me awake. Later that week, I bumped into Leah, a friend from college. She had just gotten engaged to a woman she met at a grief support group. "She doesn't save me," Leah said, "but she makes the hurting less lonely." That night, I journaled again. Maybe love isn't about being whole. Maybe it's about holding space for each other's broken parts. I began to notice the small ways people stayed or didn't. A man crying at the bodega as his girlfriend whispered, then just tell me the truth. A couple on the train holding pinkies instead of hands. A kid giving his dad a crumpled drawing, and the dad lighting up like it was a Picasso. Real love didn't look perfect. It looked real. A week later, Marcy dragged me to a rooftop party. I didn't want to go, I hadn't worn mascara in days, but she insisted. There, I met a woman named Clarissa who was halfway through a divorce and halfway through a bottle of Prosecco. She told me her ex-husband hadn't done anything awful. He just stopped showing up, as she said. He was always there, technically. But not really. That hit me hard. Back at Mars's that night, I stared at the ceiling and whispered aloud, did Adam stop showing up? Or did I stop inviting him in? Maybe both. Maybe we built walls and called it routine. Maybe the rituals that once connected us had become placeholders. And maybe I hadn't been brave enough to knock those walls down. At Mars's, I saw my reflection differently. I wasn't the same woman Adam met. I had grown quieter in some ways, louder in others. I had dreams I'd buried. I had wounds I kept hidden even from myself. One afternoon, I passed our favorite bookstore. I couldn't go in. Instead, I stood across the street and remembered how Adam once hid notes for me in books we bought together. I went home and pulled out one of those books from my bag. Inside was a yellow sticky note, years old. You make the world gentler. Never forget that. I cried for the first time in weeks. Marcy came home to find me sitting on her floor, surrounded by books and tissues. She didn't say anything. Just sat beside me and handed me a cookie. That's the thing about grief. Sometimes, the smallest kindness breaks you all over again. That week, I also pulled out an old sketch pad I hadn't touched in 3 years. Drawing had once been my therapy. I drew our apartment. Callor sleeping in her sunbeam spot. My shoes by the door. The coffee mug Adam always used. Somewhere in that sketch, I found a version of myself I missed. Quiet, observant, soft. Not weak. Just human. I remembered how Adam used to sit silently beside me as I drew, not interrupting, just existing next to me in calm solidarity. I had taken that for granted. I had assumed he'd always be there in that same quiet way. That night, I looked in the mirror for a long time. I looked older. Not in a bad way, just in a real way. I saw the lines near my eyes from laughing and crying and not sleeping. I saw a woman who had been deeply loved, and who might still be lovable. And for the first time in a while, I didn't look away. I came back to the apartment to get my things. Adam was there. Callor barked once, then jumped on me like I'd been gone a decade. Adam stood by the kitchen, unsure if he should smile. She still sleeps on your side, he said quietly. We moved around each other like shadows, both afraid to touch what felt fragile. I packed slowly, not because I needed time, but because I needed silence. And in that silence, something shifted. He poured tea and placed a mug beside me. Still 2 sugars, right? I nodded. And for the first time in a long time, I saw the man I fell in love with, not through nostalgia, but through the cracks. He was still there, behind the tired eyes. As I packed, I noticed small things. My favorite socks still folded neatly in the drawer, the basil plant I loved, and always killed, somehow still alive. He'd been tending to pieces of me, even while we were apart. We talked about Callor at first. Then about the apartment. Then, slowly, about nothing at all. The kind of nothing that used to feel full instead of empty. I sat on the floor for a moment to pet Callor. She curled into my lap like no time had passed. Adam crouched beside us, his knee brushing mine. The proximity felt both familiar and foreign. I never stopped talking to you, he said, almost a whisper. Even when you weren't here. My throat tightened. Me neither, I said. We sat there for a while. Callor dozing, the city muffled behind thick windows. There was something sacred in the pause, no pressure, no performance. Just the ache of people who missed each other but didn't know if it was okay to say so. We sat down. No agenda. No big conversation. Just tea and silence, and the dog curled between us. Eventually, he said, I don't want perfect. I just want us to stop pretending we're fine when we're not. I looked at him. Really looked. Then let's stop pretending. We talked. Really talked. About how we lost our way, not because of betrayal, but because of business. Of assuming love would do the work for us. He said he started therapy. I said I started journaling. We laughed at how millennial that sounded. He told me he'd been scared to admit he was unhappy, not with me, but with who he was becoming. I told him I'd felt the same. We were grieving the versions of ourselves that had once fit perfectly. But now, we were learning who we were, and seeing if those people could still fit together. There were no promises that night. Just truth. And it was enough. We didn't hold hands. We didn't kiss. We just sat across from each other, letting our words be the thing that touched. We admitted to little things. Resentments were tucked away, hopes would stopped voicing. I used to love Sunday mornings with you, he said. Even when we didn't talk. I used to love knowing you'd always reach for my hand in a crowd, I replied. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. Tender. Uneven. Human. We both knew that night didn't erase the past. But maybe it could shape the future. We didn't get back together that night. We started seeing each other like new people. Dates that felt like firsts. Walks without our phones. Mornings with music instead of news. We argued, too. But differently. Less about winning. More about understanding. I stopped asking him to guess what I needed. I started saying it. He stopped retreating when overwhelmed. He started sharing even when it scared him. It was messy. But it was ours. There was a night we went to the jazz bar where I'd sat alone weeks earlier. He reached for my hand during the saxophone solo. I let him hold it. I started drawing again. He started writing music again. We created, separately and together. We weren't trying to be who we were. We were making space for who we were becoming. And in that slow, awkward dance, something resembling hope returned. We even started cooking together again. Simple meals, nothing extravagant. The kind where he chopped vegetables and I stirred the pot, and somehow that felt like intimacy. One night, he burnt the garlic and cursed softly, and I laughed in a way I hadn't in months. It felt good to laugh with him, not at him or in spite of him, but beside him. One Sunday, we went back to the park near our apartment. Calla ran ahead of us, tail wagging like she'd been waiting for that moment. Adam reached into his coat and pulled out a small bag of pastries, my favorite, from a bakery we hadn't been to in years. It felt like starting over, without erasing the past. Love came back, not with fireworks, but like sunlight after a storm. Gentle. Steady. Unexpected. We renewed our lease. Not just on the apartment, but on each other. Our friends were skeptical. They'd seen breakups before. But this wasn't a reset. It was a rebuilding. He wrote me a note one morning, thanks for staying when it would have been easier to go. I wrote back, thanks for coming back when I thought you were gone. We found joy in rituals. Sunday pancakes. Friday night walks. Tuesdays spent arguing over which movie to watch, then falling asleep halfway through. Sometimes, I'd catch him looking at me like he did in year one. Not because I was doing anything extraordinary. Just existing. And that look said everything. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And real, we learned, is enough. There were still hard days. Days when old habits snuck in, miscommunications, impatience, the pull of silence. But now we recognized them faster. We named them. We held space for them. One night, we got caught in the rain walking home. Instead of running, we stopped and kissed under the awning of a closed shop. Soaked and laughing, it felt like we were teenagers again. But we weren't. We were something better. Weathered, wiser, willing. We're not a love story that ends with a wedding or a baby or a white picket fence. We're a story about trying. About pausing. About choosing again. Some days, I still feel like that girl walking through the city, lost in her own silence. But now, I have someone beside me who knows that silence isn't emptiness. It's space. Space to grow. Space to rest. Space to come home to. We still get it wrong. Sometimes I shut down. Sometimes he gets quiet. But now we catch ourselves. We apologize. We try again. Callor is older now, slower. But she still curls up between us like she always did. Like she never doubted would find our way back. And maybe that's what love really is, not a promise, not a performance, but a willingness to stay in the room, to sit in the quiet, and say, I'm still here. We may never be perfect. But every morning, when I open my eyes and see him reaching for the kettle, humming to himself, I know we're still choosing each other. And in this messy, beautiful, ordinary life, there's no one else I'd rather choose.